We want to bring into this conversation former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us here on State of Play.
Glad to be with you.
I want to share with you a post from the president this morning, a picture of the Strait of Hormuz with a caption calling it a new U.S. territory. The president keeps insisting again today the United States holds the strait. What's your assessment of the situation there right now?
Well, we don't obviously have complete information, but I think whether by design or because he stumbled into it, there are several things that Trump is actually doing correctly. I think the blockade against Iran is critical. I think starving them of any external revenues will help further destabilize the regime. And I do think that we're beginning to get movement on the Gulf, the Arab side of the Gulf, to get oil and gas and other commodities out. We had done this at various periods in the past several months. It will not be at pre-war export levels for sure, but right. The more that we can get to come out, the greater the effect on global prices. And I suspect what Trump is doing is seeing if he can just muddle through this until after the election and hope that the price of gas in the U.S. is not too negative politically for him.
It's hard to fathom the idea of muddling through, to use your word, through the midterm election. This began in February. He said it would be done in 3 or 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, I guess was his language. That would obviously be, 8, 9, 10 months. Let me ask you about Iran's response, though, as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz. They said, quote, soon referring to the president, his delusion regarding the Strait of Hormuz will either be corrected or we will correct the delusions of this deluded man. The Wall Street Journal, Mr. Ambassador, reports that Iran has taken the last 2 months to prepare for a bigger fight, installing more hardline leaders, giving the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, more control and ramping up production of missiles. What, in your view, is the president's fundamental misunderstanding of this war with Iran?
Well, how long do we have? I mean, he obviously didn't understand fully when he started what his objectives were. He didn't prepare for the possibility of an extended conflict, and he hasn't known how to measure what progress he's making toward his objectives. Look, I come from the perspective of having believed for over 20 years that there will not be peace and stability in the Middle East until the regime in Tehran is removed. I hoped at the beginning of this conflict, that's maybe what Trump wanted. I don't know what he wanted. I think it's clear he doesn't think strategically. He has a short attention span, and we are where we are now in large measure because of that. I don't know what Providence is going to do to help Trump out of the mess he's made, but I think in the near term, the more pressure we put on Iran, the harder it's going to be for the Revolutionary Guard to carry out the kind of threats they're making. I think we made a big mistake at the end of the 6 weeks of attacks by stopping, and I think we're paying for that in substantial measure right now.
And let me ask you, if I can, very quickly, in the near term, the president has now been threatening some of America's closest allies in this region. Just yesterday, threatening to, in his words, bomb the S out of Oman. How does that undercut America's strategic relationships in that region?
Well, it obviously damages them. I mean, I think Oman was a dubious choice to be a mediator to begin with, given its relations with Iran over the years. I don't think Turkey fit the role of being a mediator either. But, Trump has to stop talking about whatever thought comes into his brain and giving vent to it. I think it's that kind of conversation is evidence he's lost at sea. He's floundering. He doesn't know what to do.
Let me ask you, if I can, about another region that the president's had his focus on recently. He just scaled back military exercises in South Korea. He said he would have canceled them, but they were scheduled to start yesterday, so couldn't do that. He says the reason for this was because Kim Jong-un was, in his words, quote, unthreatening and respectful to him. But the former National Security Advisor Tulsi Gabbard, who you knew well, told Congress just this March, quote, North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missiles can already reach U.S. soil. What, sir, does Kim Jong-un take away from the president sort of rolling back our relationship to South Korea and, in effect, threatening an American ally?
Well, Trump did exactly the same thing when he first met with Kim Jong-un in Singapore in 2018. In the middle of the conversation, out of nowhere, certainly unknown to me or the other Americans in the room there with him. Trump said, I'm going to cancel these war games, as he called them, because they were expensive and provocative. He agreed with what Kim Jong-un had said. It was an unforced concession. It was a mistake. It was a mistake then. It's an even bigger mistake now. And it's not just the signal politically that it sends to Kim that Trump is once again maybe looking to revive their relationship. But at one point, Trump said they fell in love. I don't think that's how Kim Jong-un sees it. But it's not just on the Korean Peninsula where this has a negative effect. The Iranians are looking at this too, and they see more evidence of desperation.
And I want to follow up on that for a second. I traveled with the president for each of his multiple visits with Kim Jong-un during his first term. You were with him for some of that. You obviously wrote that the president's failed denuclearization efforts was a major factor in your resigning. Why, Mr. Ambassador, in your view, is President Trump so enamored by Kim Jong-un?
Well, as I say, after he met with him, he said they fell in love. He said he could tell after just really a few minutes with him that they were going to have a great relationship. And that's how Trump sees foreign affairs. If he has a good personal relationship with Kim, with Xi Jinping, with Vladimir Putin, he thinks the U.S. has good state-to-state relations with the country. And it's just simply not true. It shows Trump doesn't think strategically. He can't define American national interest. He thinks it's all personal to him.
The president is also facing new scrutiny over the USS Abraham Lincoln. As you've certainly seen, the Lincoln, that's deployment has lasted more than 260 days, was in the Middle East, will soon be coming home. There were poor conditions there. The administration is moving the USS George Washington now from the Pacific over to that region as well. That's going to leave a void, no aircraft carrier in that region. What is the risk of that void in the Pacific, where we face concerns as it relates to Russia, to North Korea, and to China?
Well, it's a very dangerous region. There's no doubt about it. And what the situation we're in now reflects a failure of political leadership, not just of the Trump administration, but in the United States generally for 35 years since the end of the Cold War, where people didn't understand that we had not reached the end of history. All conflict had not ended. And we've had sustained underspending on defense, and we're seeing the effect of that now. That's got to change in a very dramatic way.
We talked about the USS Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, there are now some new reports about a Navy missile destroyer spending 4 days last month without working toilets or air conditioning. You were the national security advisor. You know the threats the U.S. faces around the world. You know our military presence in all parts of the globe right now. What gives? What's going on as we hear multiple reports about a variety of different ships having not too dissimilar issues in terms of their conditions and preparation?
Look, we only have about 280 warships in service right now. A bipartisan committee estimated several years ago we should have about 340. These ships are aging out. It does take time to build them. We need, I think the Navy is the most stressed of all the services, and we need substantial investment in it. It's going to be expensive. And if you want to keep the deficit down but get military spending up, politicians are going to have to be honest with the American people. I'm not holding my breath on that. But the fact is we are underspending on national defense, and these are examples of it.
Ambassador John Bolton, the former national security advisor to President Trump. Mr. Ambassador, we appreciate you making time here on State of Play.
Well, thanks very much for having me.